I'm Heath Lambert, and you're listening to Marked by Grace, a podcast applying the grace of Jesus to all of life. Welcome to Marked by Grace, where this week we are talking about the ethics of in vitro fertilization. I'm talking about the ethics of in vitro fertilization because I've gotten a lot of questions about that over the last few weeks. I would love to answer other questions that you would like to bring up. If you want to do that, you can send those in to markedbygrace@fbcjax.com. That is markedbygrace@fbcjax.com. And as proof that I try to take the hard questions and the relevant questions, I'm taking this question about in vitro fertilization. I've talked about in vitro fertilization on the podcast before. Just as a real quick reminder, in vitro fertilization refers to the Latin language of in glass. That means the egg, instead of being fertilized in the woman's body, is fertilized in glass, as it said, or in a petri dish or in the lab. And the idea is that the laboratory fertilization of the egg with sperm creates an increased likelihood that fertilization will happen and allows those fertilized eggs to be implanted into the mother's body, where they, again, because we've directly implanted in them because there's a large number of them, the way this works, there is an increasing likelihood that pregnancy will result from a woman who's had trouble conceiving without this laboratory intervention. So that's a little bit of background. The question this week comes from a married couple who says that they are experiencing infertility and are considering in vitro fertilization, and they wonder if this is biblically permissible. They wonder if it's a good thing. We're having trouble conceiving. We wonder if we should biblically do this special procedure. Now, first of all, what we need to say is, in fact, I'm going to give a very quick answer and then explain it. And here's the answer. The answer is yes. Yes, that's acceptable, but be careful. The reason it is acceptable is the Bible teaches in Psalm 127, verse 3, that behold, children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb a reward. That is to say that all babies are a gift from God. It is a good thing to want a baby. It is a good thing to have a baby, and you are right to want to pursue a baby. So yes, it is permissible, but you need to be careful. And here's the reason you need to be careful. There's a principled reason and a practical reason. The principled reason is anytime you separate God's good gifts from the way God would ordinarily have it come about, you just get into risky, questionable sorts of things. So the way fertilization is supposed to happen is a married man and a married woman are supposed to come together in the marriage bed, and fertilization is the natural result of that natural process. In a fallen world, there's all sorts of things that interrupt that process, and we are right to try to come up with ways to mitigate the consequences of sin in a fallen world, and in vitro fertilization is one of those things. But it is also true that even when we get good blessings in a sinful world, it creates complications. And so in vitro fertilization just has risks that are attendant with it. It's very expensive, to say one thing. It also, one of the most common risks of in vitro fertilization is in order to have the price be worth it, there is often a very high number of eggs that get fertilized, more fertilizations than most women would ever consider having be implanted in their womb. And so then what you have is you have children, you have fertilized eggs, you have conceived human beings that are sitting around in freezers waiting to be used. And many of them, honestly, we're talking about numbers of fertilized eggs in the 7 figures. And most of those human beings are not going to know life. That is a moral problem. That is immoral. They also can be subjected to testing, and there's all sorts of other things that happen. Once you have these human beings that have been created outside of where they ordinarily would be created, we're just introducing risk in terms of what happens to them and where they wind up. So I would say that Christians, yes, absolutely are right to want children. They are absolutely correct to want to have IVF be on the list of options that they would pursue. But also Christians should not make a decision to create life that they are not willing to nurture and care for. That is, Christians do not have the option to say, I'm going to create a bunch of fertilized eggs. I'm going to create a bunch of human beings. I'm going to implant a few, and then I don't care what happens to the rest. Just to be absolutely clear, a Christian commitment to life means when we use IVF as a gift, we must only allow to be fertilized the number of eggs that we are willing to have implanted and see through to full maturation and full grown human life. That's the rule. Now, here's what I want to do. This was a very specific question from a very specific married couple, but there've been a lot of questions about the Southern Baptist Convention, because at the Southern Baptist Convention in June, the SBC passed a resolution on in vitro fertilization, and I never get questions about SBC resolutions. SBC resolutions are non-binding. Generally speaking, they're unimportant, honestly. Most of the time, these things are not remembered even moments after they are passed. But I've gotten a lot of questions about the SBC resolution on in vitro fertilization. And I think most of those questions are based on a misunderstanding. And the misunderstanding is that the SBC passed a resolution that in vitro fertilization should be condemned. And that is not what the SBC did. If you heard that, you heard media reports that mischaracterized what the Southern Baptist Convention did. First of all, I'd encourage you to read it. The name of the resolution is On the Ethical Realities of Reproductive Technologies and the Dignity of the Human Embryo. The resolution lamented infertility. It said infertility affects many married couples who have good and godly desires to bring children into the world. The resolution celebrated life. All children are a gift from the Lord, regardless of the circumstances of their conception. And this is where I think it got controversial. The resolution was honest about the concerns around IVF, as I was honest a few minutes ago. They said, the Southern Baptist Convention did in their resolution, not all technological means of assisting human reproduction are equally God-honoring or morally justified. Listen, that is uncontroversially true. There are methods of artificial reproductive technologies that place human life at tremendous risk. They are not all equally justified. They are not all equally moral. They also made clear, the resolution did, that in vitro fertilization routinely generates more embryos than can safely be implanted. And it creates a situation where many of those embryos are going to be ultimately destroyed and subject to medical experimentation. And they lament that. That's what I've done. That is true. That is a moral problem. It calls that dehumanizing, and it is dehumanizing. But what the resolution said is that we are going to affirm the unconditional value and right to life of every human being, including those in the embryonic stage, and to only utilize reproductive technologies consistent with that affirmation, especially in the number of embryos generated in the IVF process. The resolution further calls on Christians to grieve alongside of those couples who've been diagnosed and to commend couples who have earnestly sought to only utilize infertility treatments and reproductive technologies in ways that are consistent with human dignity. So it's honestly, I'm just telling you, it is not correct that the resolution condemned IVF. It condemned the abuses of IVF. It condemned misuse of IVF, but it actually commended couples who use reproductive technologies like IVF in ways that are consistent with biblical teaching. So I just want to be clear on that. The resolution is non-binding. Even if you have a different reading of the resolution than what I just gave to you, you can still know that what the moral principles are yes, children are good, and they are so good that we are right to pursue reproductive technologies, and children are so good that we are right to pursue reproductive technologies that only enhance and help and further human life and never destroys it.